Good morning, everybody. Thanks for joining us for this Zoom drop-in meeting. This is the third one that we have held. We got a few more people signed in on this one. So we have 100 people that are joining us on this conference today. The last couple ones we had were each in the 20s and the 30s. Because we're managing 100 folks, we're doing things just a little bit differently. Everybody is muted. Doug is with me today. He is managing the chat box. So if you have questions as we go along, feel free to put your question into the chat box. You can go ahead and address it to everyone. Doug will answer those as we go. If there are questions that come up that we want everybody to hear and would like me to address verbally, Doug will let me know, and if necessary, we can unmute one or two of you if you have things you want to discuss. We are also at some point, I'm waiting for Lieutenant Reimer to join us. He was going to share a couple comments with you regarding to school bus motor vehicle inspections. So he'll be joining us shortly. So here's some critical updates that I want to share with you. FMCSA has granted a waiver for CDL renewals for licenses that expired after March 1. So what they have said is that drivers have until June the 30th to renew their CDL. That's consistent with what the governor has decreed here in Ohio. So Ohio licenses are also expirations have been extended, so that if you're operating with an expired license right now, if it expired after March 1st, you have until June 30th to renew it. We've also received a guidance from Federal Motor Carrier regarding drug and alcohol testing, specifically with the random tests. As you all are probably aware, drug and alcohol testing for random is supposed to be done quarterly. You're supposed to do a certain percentage of your employees in each one of those quarters. Well, what Federal Motor Carrier has said is during this pandemic, while everything is shut down, if you're unable to complete your random tests, that's okay. What they've said to do is do this later in the school year, just get it done, not in the school year, in the calendar year, just get it done later in the year and you'll be okay. CDL testing sites. All of the BMV operated CDL testing sites in Ohio are closed at this time. However, Ohio has also licensed a number of third-party sites, and a good deal of those are open. There is a list available. It's on our OSBA website. So go to the site that I referred to just a moment ago that tells you what sites are open. It also gives you your phone numbers for them. I do recommend that you call them first. Don't just go. Call first, get an appointment. But we do know that there are at least 10 sites open across the state that are handling CDL testing. House Bill 197 was adopted into law. The legislature passed it in Ohio. The governor signed it. It had an emergency impact. And what happened is that it temporarily extends continuing law deadlines in Ohio that a state agency must comply with. It also speaks to deadlines for licenses, licensees, certificates, and things like that. So that is something to keep track of. That is the overriding authority in Ohio that allows us to put in place this 90-day extension so that you don't have to worry about licenses expiring. There is a question in the chat box that says, are the OBIs allowed to train? That is a local employer's decision. So that if you have OBIs that are willing to work, if you have drivers that are in training that are in your district, and you want to continue that process, you as an employer can absolutely allow that to continue. That was not stopped. There are no pre-service classes going on right now. Those have temporarily been put on pause. We will wait to hear from the Department of Education when those are reactivated. But if you have OBIs working, go ahead and let them work. And the other question is, can you CDL test before the pre-service class? I think it's important for everyone to remember that CDL and pre-service are two separate requirements. CDL is a federal requirement administered by the Ohio BMV. Pre-service is a training program that's administered by the Ohio Department of Education. So while we overlap them with training purposes, and we do use the pre-service program and OBIs to help with training for CDL, you do not have to complete your pre-service class before you go to the CDL training. So in fact, there are many, many CDL drivers across the country that go for CDL, and even here in Ohio, without having pre-service. So you can do those in any order. All right. I'm waiting for Lieutenant Reimer to join in. I don't see him on our list yet. So I'll go ahead and cover his slide here. I had a conversation with him last week to talk about inspections, and I know that he sent a note to ODE and to OAPT that they passed on. But here's some points on this slide that goes a little bit more into detail. If schools are open, if you have critical staff right now that are working, and so you've got mechanics there, you've got buses on the premises, and if you would like to have your buses inspected, the lieutenant advises that you should go ahead and call the normal post that you work with and request an inspection. They will schedule bus inspections as staff are available. Now, he did say that in some cases, extra patrol personnel are being used to assist with inspections. So don't worry if it's a trooper that you've never seen before, if you're afraid he doesn't know what a school bus looks like or what it should be tested for. In all cases, if an individual assigned to a school bus inspection is not familiar, they are being paired with a trained MVI. So that way we maintain continuity of what the MVI inspections are looking for. And then finally, a couple of folks 2 weeks ago asked, well, what's going to happen when the pandemic's over? What happens when we open up? Is the patrol going to have to work extra long hours? How are we going to get all the buses inspected? And what the patrol has indicated is that they're going to make every effort to complete inspections before school starts. However, they're very much aware of the restraints that are placed on school administration. So under the authority of House Bill 97, they can waive the requirements for the annual inspections until after school starts. And so what the lieutenant has shared is, don't worry, it's not the end of the day. They're going to work with you. They're being flexible. And if they can't get the buses inspected before school starts, don't worry, you're going to be allowed to operate the buses and they'll get to you just as soon as you can. So that's good news, and everybody's working together so that we get through the pandemic successfully. So ODE has issued a notice that the advanced driver training for the summer is canceled. They have also issued a notice that T9 certificates that expired after March 9th, those drivers will have 90 days to renew their certificate. And that's in concert with House Bill 197. What House Bill 197 actually says is you have 90 days from the end of the emergency. The emergency has not yet expired. So I think the exact wording on the T9 certificates may have to be adjusted a little bit by ODE. But the bottom line is, if you have drivers whose T9 expired during the shutdown period, don't worry about it. You can still use them if you need to use them. And we've been assured that ODE and the pre-service offices will work with our districts to make sure all the drivers get renewed so that we don't lose drivers before school starts. There is no information yet about T8s or T2 deadlines. I did ask that question. I was a little concerned about T8s. I know the medical community is fairly taxed. They're busy. It may be a little bit harder for us to get inspection or physicals completed for our bus drivers. And so we'll continue to communicate with ODE to see if there is a problem, we can get guidance for them. And again, under the authority of House Bill 197, it is possible for that deadline to be waived. And in fact, it does have to be waived. We have a question pending that says, when does the emergency expire? My understanding is that right now, the emergency is tied to the stay-at-home order. So I think at the very least, it goes until May 1st. I will make a note to get more clarification on that. And I'll ask one of our legislative staff to ask the legislature that adopted that rule what their intent was. All right, next slide. And many of you know this, OSBA, like almost every other association, has canceled all of our in-person trainings that were done in April. There's a very little bit of training going on in May. What we have done is rescheduled all of our April and May classes for June. Take a look at the OSBA calendar. For those of you that are in the MTA program, we're going to hold 2 classes the first week of June. For those of you that are interested in the annual T-report class that we typically do, that has been rescheduled, and we will hold that on June the 17th. That will be done both as an in-person class and as an online streaming event. So you'll have an opportunity to either come, or if you're not comfortable coming in, you can watch that one online. Go ahead and register for it, and information will be sent to you. So what's next? I think we need to do some what if thinking. Obviously, it's important for all of us to monitor Governor DeWine's daily news conferences. He's done a great job of letting us know what's going on. He made some pretty good points yesterday talking about using citizen groups and public groups to help guide the reopening of the state. We have to wait to see what public health guidance is issued. But there's some things that I want to encourage each one of you to do as we move forward. And that is, first off, stay connected. If you think for just a moment about all the logistical expertise and the routing experience and the transportation experience that's represented by the transportation directors, supervisors, and coordinators in our state, it's awesome. That is an incredible pool of knowledge. Set that aside for a second, and we all have to embrace the fact that almost every one of our superintendents is doing contingency planning, and they're starting to think, what do we need to do for this fall? Well, you know as well as I do that the best plans that get laid and worked out by our superintendents and their staff and the boards have to have transportation at the table. If they come up with a plan that involves staggered attendance or adjustments in bell schedules and transportation wasn't at the table up front, their plan's liable to fail. So what I want to do is think about what we need to consider moving forward. And so I want to stop for just a second here. I want you to take this with a grain of salt. The intent in the next couple of slides is not to create a doomsday picture. What I want you all to do is start thinking about what could we have to do, what can we do, and how will we get it done. So much of what you're going to see in the next couple of slides, I will tell you, has also been written in an article that will be included in OSBA's School Management News, which goes out next week. Because I want not only us, but those we report to, the business managers and the superintendents, to know some of the realities of a successful school start coming up this fall. So educational plans for this fall could look very, very different. We also have to accept the fact that any changes to the school day and classroom timing will affect transportation. And you know that as well as I do. So I'm going to encourage each one of you on this conference call right now and share this with your peers on either side of you. Reach out to your superintendents, make that email, phone call, however you need to contact them, and say, can I be involved in contingency planning? It's going to be very, very important for you to help them understand what you can do and what you can't do. So here's a couple facts to put on the table. Prior to the pandemic, school transportation services in Ohio were operating at capacity. Let's face it, none of you had extra drivers. Few of you had extra buses. And in many, many cases, bell schedules were very, very tight to maximize efficiency. How do we define efficiency? It's defined as a maximum riders per bus and the minimum cost per rider. We're leaving that behind and moving into a whole new generation. And we're going to talk about that here in just a moment. So after the pandemic, many scenarios are possible, but none are certain. It's not inappropriate to start thinking about what may be and how it may impact on transportation. Any changes in the school system that don't talk to the transportation experts in the district could very easily fail. And when that happens, everybody looks bad. So here's a case where we got to work together. Here's some potential needs and the impacts. And I've got 4 or 5 slides on these. And by the way, I will digress for just a moment here. The Minnesota Department of Health has already released a document with recommendations for schools as they restart this next school year. It's an interesting document. Having read it through a number of times, there's almost no consideration of transportation in it. And they're the first ones out. So a lot of people are going to be looking at that. I have posted that document on our website. Take a look at it, read it, think about it. And then I think that's the document that you need to sit down with your superintendent saying, if any of these things are implemented, here's what we need to do locally to make sure it happens. So many of these ideas here actually come from my reading of the MDH document. We may need to increase social distance inside our school buildings. So how do you do that? Well, we might have to stagger attendance times. We might have to reduce the number of students in the building at one time. If we do that, it's going to affect route times. For those of you that are running multiple routing tiers, there is more impact than if you're a single tier. So how do we fix that? Well, we could go to a single tier. If we tried to transport everybody at the same time, then we can spread things out. But the net effect of doing that is we need more buses and we need more drivers to transport the same number of students. That's not a resource that really any of us have available. So building on that, if the goal is to space out the kids, then the next question becomes, well, who's more important? Who do we want to focus on? If spacing out one group of students means we lose transportation for other students, it's fairly likely that we're going to see a prioritization of elementary or special education students. If we're taking care of the elementary children and the special eds, we may not be able to transport other students. Are you still going to be able to run your middle school routes if you're double tiering the elementaries? What about high school? And then what about the non-public and the community school schedules? Are we going to be able to take care of them if we're devoting more resources to our, the little people? And the question is, maybe not. And then the question comes up, well, what about vocational schools? Most of our districts participate in either joint vocational districts or compacts. So those students also need to be transported. And the question is, can we still do that? And then here's an interesting question for you. How do we increase social distancing on a school bus? And you think about that long yellow hot dog that goes down the road, and you think about seat spacing. So let's talk about a 66 passenger bus. If we were to put 21 riders on a 66 passenger bus, then what we have accomplished is a 30-inch social distancing. If we need to follow that 6-foot social distancing, that's pretty hard. We could consider a 60-inch distance, but that only gives us 10 riders per bus. So you take a 66 passenger bus and you cut the ridership down to 21 or even maybe down to 10. That's a serious impact. Some of you are running 72 passenger buses, and in that case, you really only get 1 or 2 more riders. So what's that compare to what we're doing right now? Well, if I look at the numbers that came off the T1 reports from this past fall, the average ridership in Ohio on a bus is 27 students. Now, that's average. So that means most districts are double routed. And so we've got 2 buses running at the same time. However, it's my experience working with you in the field that in most cases, the ridership on the elementary buses is a whole lot stiffer than it is on the high school buses. So it's not uncommon to have 40, 50, even 60 children on an elementary bus, and much less on a high school route. So if we have to implement social distancing on a school bus, again, it gets us back to where we were a moment ago. We're not going to be able to serve as many students. We can't add more buses. We don't have more buses. And obviously we can't add more drivers because we can't find more drivers. Let me pause for just a second here. Lieutenant Reimer is on here. Lieutenant, I have just opened up the microphone on your screen.
Can you hear me now, sir?
Yeah, we got you. There you are, Lieutenant. Welcome aboard.
My apologies for the late arrival. It's been a little bit busy, but I'm sure everyone understands that.
Yep, we understand that. We actually heard the sirens and the lights flashing on your way to the meeting. So I already covered that slide that I had shared with you, and
Yes,
I wanted to take this break since you're on board with us now. If you want to expound on that, I hit the 3 points that you and I had agreed on that you shared with me.
Thank you, sir.
A couple of the folks have said they've got teams of 7 troopers on their lot right now doing inspections, and so the floor is yours for a moment here.
All right. Well, thank you for the opportunity to speak to everybody, Pete. I really appreciate you letting me join in. The Highway Patrol here is, as always, one of your team members coming right alongside of you, trying to help as we get through this pandemic and, as the governor has said, the new normal for the moment. So thank you for everything that you guys do on a day-to-day basis. I know that everyone shares the same concerns, and that would be safe transportation of Ohio's pupils as we can, when we can. You have been seeing maybe new faces to you, but definitely not new to the program. As we come in and we try to get your buses inspected as it is beneficial for you. So please understand, the Highway Patrol is not pressing anybody to get this done. We have the time. We are a resource. We're bringing back our motor vehicle inspectors, the MBI side. They'll start back on Monday with their responsibilities coming back in. That doesn't mean that if you guys are still shut down or you're still in a particular spot that you don't want others outside of your own personnel on your grounds, we understand that. We're working with you. They should be getting a hold of you to create a schedule that is beneficial to all. So thank you for your time. I know one thing that has come up is how are we going to protect the driver when it comes to when we go back to, so obviously I see that you guys are on social distancing on a bus. There's going to be a lot of effects as it comes to the transportation side. So we are looking into options right now of what can be done to make it a little bit safer for the driver. What are options can we bring in on a bus? Plexiglass has been suggested. There's some other things that are being suggested. I'm currently working on, and Pete, you and I need to have a conversation later on into getting a group together to think very specifically on how we can do this. So there's some concerns with plexiglass when it comes to safety. So in essence, what I'm saying is we're trying to come up with the best options that will be available to you folks to get on a bus that will keep the bus driver safe, that will keep the students safe, and that will not interfere with the structure of the bus. So federal guidelines, state guidelines, and hopefully something cheap would be really nice, right?
Yeah.
But that's where we stand right now. Again, I appreciate everything you guys do. I understand it. I am sure that it is a little stressful for you guys. So if there's something that I can do, answer a question. I'm sure if you don't have my email, Pete has my email. Phone number is out there, and that is 614-204-7290. Again, 614-204-7290. That's my state issued cell phone. It's on 24/7. If you think of something at 3 o'clock in the morning and you want to talk about it, call me. I may not answer at 3, but I will get back with you, and we will do our best to help you as we move forward with this particular issue that's been brought before us. So again, Pete, I really appreciate you letting me join in. Thank you, sir. And anything I can do for you guys, holler at me.
Thanks, Lieutenant. Had a couple questions pop up while we've got you on the hook here. I have one person asking if they can put hand sanitizers on the bus. I think you already sent out a communication about that. Maybe you can cover that real quickly.
Absolutely. So currently 12 ounces is what is allowed. And as long as it is secure, I believe 12 ounces should be enough to get you through a route. At least at the moment, we're considering some other options at the moment. We haven't found a good solution. So if you have a good solution that you believe would be a benefit, please let us know. But that is as a current option right now. Yes, you can put hand sanitizer on there. My concern with the location is that anything that we put near the door as they're coming in and out can be a catch point. So we've got to be really cautious in the entrance way that we don't have a student getting caught up on a device that we put in that area. So I'm doing my best to keep that area free and open. But again, I'm open to considerations. We've got to look at where it's going to go, how it's going to be mounted, things of that nature. So the medicine can't be worse than the disease, so to speak. So.
Yeah, and your point about a catch point is well taken, Lieutenant. We were one of the first states to struggle with the catch point. We had a child who had a backpack strap back in the 80s caught in the door on the way out that caused a national concern. So that's a well-made point that putting things on either side of the stairwell where children are going in and out of the bus is probably not the best solution. So I'm glad to hear you say we'll pull a group together and we'll figure out what the best solution is and issue a guidance out there. Another question that's coming in, we've had 2 or 3 folks say, is it going to be okay for drivers to drive with face masks? I personally don't see any issues with that. In fact, that may be a very strong recommendation that comes out of ODH here in the future.
So there isn't anything that the Highway Patrol would say one way or the other in regards to face mask or personal protection for the driver. So face masks, eyes, gloves, things of that nature, follow CDC requirements, state health department requirements, and what our governor is saying. My only caution is this: anytime you restrict the breathing on people, which an N95 is going to cause some restriction of breathing, we need to make sure that our drivers have the wherewithal and at least understand that concept and what it can do. So if we restrict their breathing, they're not used to it, they get behind the wheel, I would really hate for somebody to pass out. So just as long as the transportation guys understand that that is a potential. So if it's the first time that they're getting behind the wheel and they're putting the mask on, it's probably not the best idea to have kids on that bus. So that they understand their physical limitations, I guess is a good way to put it.
So I think what that moves us into is the very nature of the PowerPoint slides we're going through right now. We're talking about what ifs, what could be, and then how do we accomplish it. There's a lot of work to be done in the coming weeks and the coming months. A lot of people need to be at the table so that we can have these conversations, figure out how to make them successful, how to protect not only the kids, but the drivers, because the drivers are important also. And so we'll work together on that. Lieutenant, I've had we've got over 90 folks on the call right now, and I've had a couple of them send in notes saying that they would be happy to participate. So I'll make sure to get those names to you. And then we can get a work group in place.
Well, again, we'll talk in the days coming. So thank you very much, Mr. Biskey. Appreciate it.
Okay. Yep. Thanks, Lieutenant. Have a great day.
You too. Thank you.
All right. So let's move on here to the next slide. We're still talking about potential needs and impacts. And one of the things that's bound to come up is bus cleaning, and this whole notion of, can we clean the buses between routes? Do we have to clean them between routes? And how much time will it take to do it? So there's two things we have to think about. One is, if you stop to clean the buses between routes, you need some time for the driver or someone else to do that. The second part of that is, if you're cleaning with EPA approved disinfectants, which is what ODH and the federal agencies are recommending, those disinfectants require a certain amount of time to kill the virus, which means it's not enough to just wipe down the seats, the touched materials, surfaces, but there also has to be some time for the reagent to do its work. And then you have to allow additional time for whatever substance it is to dry, evaporate, and no longer be a wet reagent on a seat. And then here's the other thing to think about, is that those cleaning agents really can't be stored on the bus. And so there's three things that we have to think about on our time schedule. One is, how do we get the bus to a safe location where it can be cleaned, where the materials are available? Secondly, how long will it take the staff person to clean that bus? And then the final factor is, how long does the bus have to rest after it's been cleaned for the disinfectants and the reagents to do their work in killing the virus? So here's the bottom line. We are going to lose bus route capacity. There's no way we can get around that. And again, every one of these slides, here's the point that I want to share with you, and it's why it's so important for you to reach out to your superintendents, business managers, and other staff in the district. Let them know that there's lots that we can do to keep students safe, to keep drivers safe. But we were operating at peak capacity before the pandemic, and any changes we make now are going to reduce our transportation capacity. So that kind of leads us into, what about our drivers? We may have to consider sneeze guards. Like the lieutenant said, the discussion is, well, what about plexiglass? Is that a good? Is that a bad? There's things we can do here in the state. It will require waivers in law, but we also have to consider the fact that the school bus is the most highly regulated passenger vehicle in the US. So there are some things that we have to be ever mindful of. We can't arbitrarily change things here in Ohio if they're mandated at a federal level. So in some cases, there may have to be conversations with National Highway Traffic Safety Administration, and they may have to issue waivers to certain ones of the FMVSS regulations before we can ever consider it here in Ohio. And then the question becomes, if we can overcome those hurdles, how long will it take us to implement whatever guidance is put out there? So You know, we can talk about making the buses safer, altering the buses, adjusting the buses, but ultimately what it boils down to is the drivers. Some of our drivers, let's face it, are in the high risk group. And it may not be safe for them to come back to work unless there's a vaccine out there that actually accomplishes what it needs to do. Others of the drivers may choose not to come back to work for other reasons. Maybe they don't want to be responsible for cleaning the bus and working with different solvents and chemicals. Maybe they've got childcare issues, and we don't know. Our daycares going to be open in time to take care of the small people, leaving our younger parents available to work? There's just things that we have to keep in mind. I have a good friend who was the transportation director for the state of Florida for many, many, many years. And one of the lessons that he repeatedly shared with his peers around the country, those of us that held similar seats in other states, is that in any emergency, regardless of what it is, and for him, those were weather related, hurricanes, things like that. But in any emergency, it's not unusual to lose 30% of your working staff. So I know that each one of you as supervisors has had days where you had to fill 20 or 25% of your routes because of call-offs and sickness. But if you start the school year with 30% less than you normally would have, the bottom line is our capacity is going to shrink. Right now, none of us knows what we got to do this fall. I think the one safe bet is that any changes that affect transportation are most likely going to reduce our capacity. We can't come up with more buses. We can't come up with more drivers. The bottom line is that someone who's riding now may not be able to ride a school bus this fall. So that's not only a district impact, that's also a state impact. We've already reached out to members of the legislature saying, what are we going to do with non-publics? What are we going to do with community schools? If, you know, the public school districts are prioritizing keeping their elementary school children safe, doing double routing, tier spacement, classroom shrinkage, and that impacts on our middle schools and our high schools, what happens to the non-public routes? And so those questions are already being asked. It's going to impact on all of us, and the legislature is going to have some tough decisions to make on that also. So here's where I would say to you as a manager, we have to be flexible. Don't get down into the dumps, think, okay, the sky is falling, this is the end of life as we know it. It might be, but life goes on. I think what we have to do for each one of you, these are going to look a little bit different. Build a list of the options. Identify what adjustments you think might be applied in your district. So you're almost going to what if or second guess your superintendent. It helps if you're working with them. Think, you know, ask them, what are you thinking about? What are you considering? And then for each one of those adjustments, identify the limitations. How does it impact on your routes? I want you to be realistic about your capacity to provide service. You know, for decades, I have bragged about how resourceful and how capable Ohio's transportation directors are. The bottom line is the boss says do it, and we find a way to get it done. This is probably not going to be the summer where you say, whatever you need, I'll get it done. I think we need to be realistic and figure out, okay, how much time do I have run routes? How many buses do I have? And how many staff do we have available to drive those buses and keep things going? So put the cards on the table and let them know what we can do and what we can't do. And if they're coming up with an option and you can't do it, now's not the time to say blindly, we'll find a way, because it's probably going to be hard to do. Stop and checking the chats right here. Lieutenant has sent a couple updates for me, and I'll get them out to everybody. Again, just a note, everything we talk about today, we're going to get up on the website so you all have available. So you can look at it, feel free to share it with your peers. So here's, in closing the PowerPoint part of this, what I want to share with you, stay in close communication with the superintendent and with your district's planning team. Probably a lot of you like me is thinking, you know what, I've had enough. I've had a good run. I've been at the table for a long time. It's time to just go sit on the back patio, open a beer, put my feet up and enjoy things. But let me say to you, now is when the district needs each one of you more than ever. Your skills, if we lose those, your districts are in trouble. So it's important to stay at the table, really focus on having good rider data. Now is the time to make sure your database is solid, that you know which kids ride, which kids don't ride. Now is also the time to figure out, which drivers can you bring into office to help you? Because I think it's a fairly certain thing that as we move into July and August, there's going to be a lot of routing needs that are coming up at the last minute, and we're going to need help. Don't try and do it by yourself. Figure out who you've got out there that can assist, and let's see if together we can get past this next thing. The governor is very fond of saying that Ohioans have stepped up, they're doing the right thing. Here's a case where we're a niche industry, and yep, we have to step up too. Right now, our superintendents, our communities really need our skills, and so that's what we're going to have to focus on, figure out what we can do. So I'm going to close the PowerPoint by saying I want to share three things with you. One is I want you to stay in touch with your peers. Now more than ever, I think it's important for us to communicate with each other. I know there's a bunch of small chat groups going on around the state. I think that's a great thing. We'll do another one of these in 2 weeks with more updates, so I'll send more information out then so that everybody can join in. Now is the time to share ideas. And those of you that have been in class with me in the MTA program know that we like to do something called blue skying in there. Share ideas now. Now's the time to blue sky them, throw them up on the wall. Anything that sticks, take a look at it. Figure out if maybe there's a germ of a great idea in there. And we're going to have to be creative and think outside the box. And then the final part of this is you need to protect your own health. Folks, if you get sick or if you get stressed out, and we're seeing that in the medical community, we're seeing some key docs they've just been going too fast, too long, and too hard. And unfortunately, there's been a couple of suicides in the past week. I spent 13 years as a firefighter, and one of the lessons that got drilled into me was if you get hurt, there's no one left to pull you out. So here's a case where, folks, we need your expertise. Your superintendents need it. Protect your own health. Do your best not to get sick. Keep your family safe. And that way we can stay at the table and help our districts be successful. So let me put this on, and then I'm going to close my screen share, and we'll open this up to anybody that's got comments. We've been going for a little bit better than an hour. We'll do another drop-in meeting 2 weeks from today. We'll do it again at 10 a.m. Those of you that are interested in joining, just like last time, I'm going to ask you to send an email to mta@ohioschoolboards.org. We'll send out the meeting codes for that meeting. In the interim, I will tell you that I'm working on a couple more of our statewide email addresses. All of you are on that list, and they're also posted on the website. So as things develop, as new information comes up, we'll get it out to you by email. You can also check the website. So let me stop the share and say, who's got something that they want to address? We'll hang on here for a couple minutes. We'll watch the chat box. I have to tell you, this is weird. I like working in front of a classroom where I can see and hear people. It's very different when I'm sitting in my office and I can see you. I can't hear anything. Somebody asked, how do we follow the law that requires us to transport? And what are the repercussions if we're not able to? So I'm going to guess that's probably with reference to community schools, non-publics, and let's face it, it's also going to impact on foster children, homeless children, and things like that. I don't know what the repercussions are going to be. What I'm trying to do, and I'm working with our legislative team, is starting to identify those constraints early on so that we can get those to members of the legislature so that they can know this is coming up. And we've already talked about, maybe we have to propose to the legislature that a bill needs to be introduced that in essence not withstands some of the requirements that exist in 332701. It might be that when we start school year this year, our focus on who gets transport needs to be a little bit different. Do you have any others that we need to hit?
Oh, I don't. I unmuted a few, Aaron Reimer, and I unmuted a couple others if they wanted to make a comment here. Dan Groothouse, so we appreciate all the work you've done this year.
So Dan, speak up if you want to say something. They're listening to you.
The biggest thing I think is what Lieutenant Reimer talked about is getting that work group together and coming up, bouncing ideas off each other and what we can do from a driver perspective and what the inside of a bus has to look like come August, or for some even July. So tight timeline, and then the ability to do what we come up with and finding the materials we need as we see around the nation is a problem as well.
Will Schwartz, you're with us. Will's on our legislative team at OSBA. Will, you got any insights that you might want to share?
Hey, Pete. Good morning, everyone. Pete's mentioned it several times, that to have those discussions with your superintendents, your business officials, because they'll carry that message with their conversations with their local legislators, as well as the lobbyists for those associations and myself and others, because there's a lot of focus about, getting the economy back on track and addressing the impact that the pandemic is having on businesses. But those are the immediate considerations people are having. But, us being in schools looking forward to August and September, those folks aren't thinking of, the legislators, aren't necessarily thinking of return to school and the challenges that we'll face then. So if we can continue to work to let them know of the issues that we'll face in August and September early on, then we'll be able to plan for that adequately. We are working on a supplemental piece of legislation that the legislature will likely be handling in May or the first week of June, about additional flexibility and relief for schools as we are returning to school in August, and whatever that might look like. So please do continue to have your conversations with your administrators and with your legislators as well.
Lieutenant, your mic is open. Anything else you want to address while they're answering their poll?
Not at this moment. Again, I just appreciate the time with you all, and we will come up with some viable solutions for you in regards to the safety of our school bus riders as well as those driving. So it's just going to take us a little bit of time to get the correct solution out that we can apply statewide. And that is one thing. And Mr. Japiski, you know this probably better than the rest of us. A solution may sound really good to you, but when you try to apply it statewide, it has complications. So even though it may sound like a really good idea to you, if somebody tells you no, please just keep that in mind, that the solutions that we are coming up with when it comes to construction and safety of a bus we have to be able to apply it statewide. It has to be applied manufacturing to every manufacturer that's out there. So we're doing our best to make sure that those solutions that are presented meet those requirements. So again, thank you for your time.
Great. So there's a couple comments in here. I'm scanning our chat box while you're doing the polls. There's a fairly consistent theme saying we need answers sooner than later. I think we're all in that boat. I don't know about you, but I've been waiting for answers for the last 6 weeks. We're going to have to work together. And you know, the lieutenant makes a really good point. As we work together, we need state agencies at the table, we need us at the table, and we need school administrators, meaning superintendents and folks at the table, so that we can make good decisions. We are big. I mean, we're talking 800,000 children that are using our service right now, 15,000 buses. There's over 600 agencies that provide transportation. So what works for Columbus City might not work for Dublin, or might not work for a 3-bus agency, and vice versa. So these are going to be things that we have to be very, very careful. Governor DeWine has made a good point. It was, in a lot of ways, it was easier to turn things off than it was to turn them back on. When we turn things back on, and Mayor Ginther of Columbus, City of Columbus, made a good point, says we only get one chance to do it right. If we make a mistake when we turn things back on, then things could easily be worse than they started with. Well, everybody, I want to thank you very much for joining us today. We've been going at this for a while, and I think we've shared a lot of great ideas. Again, if you have more questions, more things that we didn't get to today, feel free to email them to either Doug or myself. And what I think we'll start building is an FAQ section and add that to the other things in our pandemic section so that we can keep things updated there. I also encourage you to log into the website, check out that page so you can see what's going on there. I will get all this stuff posted, get it up on the website. And again, I want to reiterate what others have said before me. Thank you very much for what you do. You are valuable. You probably have no idea how much you are valuable to your districts. And now, more than ever, is when your superintendents and when the students and the drivers need us to stay at the table. We are going to have to think out of the box. Things will be differently. And yep, we are going to probably work harder this summer than we've ever worked before. And it's unfortunate we have to use things like social, or like this kind of a media tool to get together. It'd be a whole lot nicer if we were face to face in the same room. But on the flip side, those of you, and I'm staring at a couple of faces that I know live 3.5 hours away, this does make it easier for you to get into a meeting and get back home and still eat lunch on time. So thank you all for being here, and have a great day. We'll send out information and get stuff posted, and we'll try this again in 2 weeks. Thank you very much.